This is the front of my trouser, and there are two pieces here, and this is actually part of the construction. It's a joined on fly facing. I need to make sure that I've marked this line here, which is actually the centre front line, so I need to put a tack through there. And the first sewing stage, I need to stitch between point A here and point B here, and I have to do that before I do any construction on my fly. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark those up. This is stage one of the zip fly construction. I'm stitching from A through to point B. I'm just going to pop a couple of pins in to hold that in position. And I'm putting a few pins along this centre front line as well, because once I've stitched this line, I'm going to use a basting stitch on the sewing machine to hold my centre front together while the fly is constructed. This is the wrong side of the fabric. I've marked it all over with chalk so that you know that it's the wrong side. I'm using a denim because it's got a very obvious right and wrong side. So my first little sewing job, I'm going to stitch from here to here with a regular stitch. Then I'm going to baste this centre front line. Then I'm going to press this open, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, so I've done that sewing, and I've just clipped in here to allow this curve to open. I'm looking at the inside of my trousers, and from the inside, this is the left side of the body. They're men's trousers, which means that the left goes over the right. So this refers to the left fly now. Little trick, if you're doing this at home and you're going to get confused, you can write left in there, and there's no chance of you stitching your fly back to front. So this is going to form the fly facing, and this is going to form part of an extension which will be trimmed away shortly. So the first stage, I'm going to take my zip, and this one is actually a little long, but that doesn't matter because I can cut the top of my zip off. And I'm going to line up my zip tape on the right hand side. So this is the right fly extension, and I'm lining up the edge of this zip tape. The zip is face down, and I'm lining that edge up with that centre front there, and my zip stop needs to go just a little bit below that point there. So I'm going to get this pinned into position here, and I'm only sewing it through the flap. I'm not going all the way through to the front of the garment. So I'm going to get that pinned in. This is my zip pinned in position on the right fly extension. I've lined up the zip stop with position B that was marked on the pattern, and if you've got a zip that's too long that goes beyond the end, don't worry about that, because we're going to be attaching a waistband, so we can actually shorten this zip at the waist without having to worry about getting the right size. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine now that it's pinned into position, and I'm going to sew it with a one-sided zipper foot. Now I like to use this universal zipper foot, which is a really skinny zipper foot. You can also use one that may well come with your machine. This is another one-sided foot, and it's got a lot less bulk on the foot, which means it doesn't fall off the zip when you're trying to stow it. You really do need to have a zipper foot to try and get these zips in. Okay, so I've stitched my zip into position. This is a habit of mine from working in theatre. I like to put a double row stitch in to make these zips really strong, but you only really need that first row of stitching that's quite close to the zip coil. So this is where we start to construct the zip fly. I lift up my zip tape, and I take the zip tape and this right flap over to the left hand side, and I'm keeping it all flat underneath, so I'm not rucking it over too far that way. I'm just taking it over until it sits nice and flat. Then I'm going to pin this into position, and I'm again only pinning through the extension. I'm not pinning all the way through to the outside of the garment. So I've now pinned my zip tape to the left fly extension, which is going to form my fly facing, and if you look underneath you can see that this is my centre front line, and my zip has kind of moved over. So this is my centre front, and now my zip has moved all the way over onto the left fly, so it's sitting like this, and this is starting to form the the hidden bit, the bit that stops us seeing our zip. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and using the opposite side of my one-sided foot, I'm going to stitch this tape down. Zip is now stitched to both my right side and my left side. So the next stage, I'm going to trim down this right fly extension because I don't need this anymore. And I trim that to just beyond the zip. Like so. And then I'm going to turn my trousers to the right side, and from here I'm going to open up that little basting stitch, so I'm opening up my centre front. So you can see that my zip is now on the inside of my trousers. This is the centre front line here, this fold, and it's important to keep that flat. And the zip is attached to the fly, but it's not actually attached to the front yet. So the next stage, I open up my zip, and I'm going to turn it back to the wrong side. Starting to look like the inside of a pair of trousers. We're now going to construct what's called a fly shield, and the fly shield is going to sit in here, and it stops the teeth from sitting on your skin or getting caught up, and it just hides everything and makes it look really neat. So you can see it's starting to look like a fly. And the zip shield, I'm using a piece of yellow. If I open this out, there's a fold on one side, it's shaped like that. So what I now need to do is to go to the sewing machine, and it's simply constructed by doing some zigzag around here, and then we're going to lay this into the right side of my fly. So I've just done a little zigzag around here. This is a crude way of constructing a fly shield, it's nice and quick, and I'm going to lay the longer straight edge of my fly shield on top of my zip and the right side of my trouser. And I'm going to be machining down here using again my one-sided foot, and I'm going to overcast the raw edge as well, just pinning that into position. Starting to see how this is going to look. That's going to be on the inside of my trouser. So when this is all constructed, you should see a nice yellow fly shield. So my fly shield is now attached to the right hand side of my zip, and I've overcast all the layers together to just finish that off. It's important when you line up the position of the fly shield, this bottom edge, that it sits just over your zip stop, because we don't want it to get in the way when we do the top stitching at the front. Now when I open this out, you can see I have my centre front line fold, and this little seam here can roll into your teeth, so it's quite a good idea to just do a little row of top stitching to hold that fold out of the way. And doing this top stitching gets a bit awkward when you get down here, so you can't really go beyond that point. I've done a row of top stitching here. Sorry, the pink isn't really showing up. I've taken it from the top right down and stopped by the zipper at the bottom here. It's a little bit tricky to get into this little area, but you can do it. I've given it a little press, try and get rid of that fold, and then the next and final stage is I need to actually stitch the left side of my trouser all the way through to this fly facing in here. So I'm just going to line the centre front back up, and I like to just pop a pin here at this point. Then turn it back to the wrong side, stitching this down. So do up your zip. I want this to be as flat as possible from the right side. So I usually pin my fly shield right out of the way. I'm going to pin this here from the wrong side, but I'm going to do my stitching from the right side, because this is visible on the outside and you want it to look really nice. So this is the left side of my trouser, and I want to do a nice shape fly in here. And one little trick for that I learned when I was a tailor is to use my fly shield pattern, and you want the depth of it to be around about 1 inch. Give yourself a little template for this. Some people use sellotape to mark this down, and then I'm going to use disappearing tailor's chalk. This is the lazy seamstress's favourite gadget because I can draw things over the right side. So I'm just going to give myself a little shape here. And again, this could have been tailor's tacked on before I started. And I'd usually straighten this up with a ruler. I'm now going to top stitch through the left side of my trouser, my fly facing that my zip's been attached to, all the way around, and stop at this point here. And this is what you see on the outside of your fly. Stitched along my iron off chalk line, and I just want you to see what happens when I run the iron over it. See that chalk has totally disappeared. From this point here, I'm going to do a little bar tack, and what that does is it just strengthens the bottom of your zip, which is a stress point. The inside, I'm going to put a machine stitch to hold my fly shield to this left hand side, and that again just strengthens the whole structure of your fly. So I've done a little satin zigzag stitch to bar tack the bottom, which strengthens the bottom of my zip. I've done this a little heavier than I would usually just so that you can see it on there. The second little bar tack, just holding my fly shield to my left fly facing, and when I open my zip, you can see that that bar tack stops this whole seam from completely opening. You can see my fly shield here on the right side of the garment, and this is the left side of the garment, and my zip is completely concealed inside my fly. Easy, huh?